Okay. Tell me when we're live. Yep. But the picture's not showing. All right, we started. So good afternoon and welcome to the bill hearings for the House Health and Government Operations Committee. I am the Chairman, Jocelyn Peña-Melnick, joined by my Vice Chair, Bonnie Collison. I kindly ask for your patience if we encounter any technical streaming issues, which we did today for the first time, not bad. We gone 3 weeks without it. Please set your electronic devices to vibrate. If you need to have a conversation, please go outside. As a reminder, there's no food or drink allowed in the gallery because then staff has to clean it. For each bill, we're going to hear from the bill sponsor and the sponsor panel, followed by an all in-person witnesses. So it will go favorable, favorable with amendment, unfavorable, favorable with amendment, and unfavorable for both supporting witnesses in opposition. The bill sponsor in this committee is not limited. While all witnesses have 2 minutes to provide testimony, and there'll be a timer that you'll see. Although it is not limited, please be kind and considerate because I will have to stop you if you take more than you should. Please adhere to our usually committee rules for my wonderful committee members, and I know you're doing that already, of 1 question and 1 answer, and please keep your questions brief. Members of the public will be able to view the live stream of this hearing on the Maryland General Assembly website and YouTube channel. And today we will hear the bills in the following order. And keep in mind that I may change it depending on if one of the sponsors is in another committee. I ask for your flexibility. The first one will be House Bill 342, Delegate Bagnall, State Procurement, Prompt Payment of Suppliers. Will you come up with your panel, please? The second one will be House Bill 390, Delegate Henson, Commission on African American History and Culture, Museum Name Change. And the final bill of the day will be 299, Delegate Gramer, Public Safety, Militia, Active Duty Combat, Defend the Guard. So good afternoon, Delegate Bagnall. Will you please get started?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Heather Bagnall, District 33C, Anne Arundel County, testifying on behalf of House Bill 342, Prompt Payment of Suppliers. You have my written testimony, so I will quickly summarize. House Bill 342, the cross-file of Senate Bill 183, which was heard in Budget and Tax last week, stems from a number of small businesses working on state highway projects who were not getting paid in a timely manner. When contacted, the State Highway Administration confirmed there was no remedy in existing law, as their companies were deemed to be suppliers and therefore not covered under the prompt payment statute. House Bill 342 would add suppliers to the existing law, which requires prompt payments of contractors and subcontractors under state procurement law. Additionally, suppliers are already afforded these protections in private contracts, so House Bill 342 will address a discrepancy between protections in the public and private sectors. You will see in your packet that the Department of General Services is in support of the legislation and there is no fiscal impact. You will also see a favorable with amendment due to a concern raised during the Senate hearing, and we're working with stakeholders and our Senate counterpart on a clarifying amendment, which we believe will address the concerns raised in the testimony and keep the bills aligned across the chambers. For all these reasons, I am asking for a favorable report on House Bill 342.
Thank you. Next, please.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is John Fiastro, Fiastro Consulting, here on behalf of the Cybersecurity Association of Maryland. Cybersecurity Association of Maryland, otherwise known as CAMI, is in support of HB 342, State Procurement Prompt Payment of Suppliers. CAMI numbers over 600 members from Fortune 500 companies down to solo owner operators, and has a count of over 100,000 Maryland employees amongst their members. For the members, certainty of payment and prompt payment is a critical consideration for businesses contemplating whether they should engage with a prime contractor on a bid for a Maryland contract. The 10 days guaranteed to the suppliers provides that certainty. Even though that's existing statute, it extends it to the suppliers. Now, policies like this encourage small businesses like CAMI members to lay in with prime contractors. And what that also means then is that we have more potential suppliers bidding in on those contracts. More potential suppliers means more competitive prices and better quality for Maryland taxpayers who are footing the bill for these contracts. So with that, CAMI supports HB 342 and asks for a favorable report. Thank you for the delegate for putting the bill in as well.
Thank you. I know I usually go to the members first unless I have a clarifying question, which I do in this instance. There's a letter from the Associated Builders and Contractors where they have a proposed amendment. Are you accepting that amendment?
Oh, we're working with them to make sure that amendment does address their concern and that we're not running afoul of the existing statute.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for these two witnesses? Seeing none, thank you so much for your testimony today, and thank you for working ahead of time with all the stakeholders. This actually concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 342. Next, we have House Bill 390. Delegate Henson, you came right on time. Commission on African American History and Culture, Museum name change. Can you bring your panel, please? Okay, why don't you get started, and welcome to the Health and Government Operations Committee.
Thank you. Colleagues, I am here to present House Bill 390. This bill would rename the Banneker Douglas Museum to the Banneker Douglas Tubman Museum. We know that Harriet Tubman is not just a symbolic figure here in Maryland. She is truly one of our unsung heroines who played a pivotal role in American democracy. We also know that this bill would have a great impact on the legacy of the museum. Currently, Benjamin Banneker and Frederick Douglass, whose names are enshrined in the museum, are both males who in their own rights were significant African-American historical figures. But we don't have a woman reflected in that legacy and in that title. And that's what this bill would do. It isn't just a legislative move, it's a collective voice shaping our history. The role that she has in inspiring and educating Marylanders would be extended and continued in renaming this museum. We have representatives from the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture here to testify before you, and also the executive director of the Banneker Douglas Museum. Thank you, colleagues.
We love it. Look at that. You did it in like a minute. All right, that's a new record. Who's next? Let's see if you can beat that record.
I'll try.
You don't need to. Go ahead. Just
Okay.
stick to the 2 minutes.
Yes, ma'am. Greetings, Chair Melnick and members of the Health and Government Operations Committee. As the Executive Director of the Banneker, well, you have my written testimony, so I'm just gonna give some quick.
Speak from the heart.
Yes, my name is Chanel Johnson, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Banneker Douglas Museum, Maryland State Museum on African American History and Culture. Our mission is to preserve authentically African American history and culture in the great state of Maryland. Our current namesakes, which Delegate Henson had mentioned, is Frederick Douglass and Benjamin Banneker, both Maryland born. Frederick Douglass being a famed abolitionist, we all know him, orator, and Benjamin Banneker, who helped survey our nation's capital of Washington, D.C. Just a little bit about Harriet Tubman, because some people don't know the very details of her legacy. She was born in Dorchester County, Maryland. She self-liberated, and she really started her work as an abolitionist to liberate her own family and close networks. She then went on to serve for the Union Army, and she was the first woman to lead a major military operation that freed over 700 enslaved African-American men, women, and children during the Civil War. This year is 2024, is Maryland's 160th anniversary of Maryland emancipation. So during this milestone year, we ask that you support House Bill 390 to include Tubman in our name as the Banneker Douglas Tubman Museum. Thank you.
Next, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, distinguished members of the committee. I am Dr. Edwin T. Johnson, and I am the current chair of the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture. We are the state of Maryland's official preservers, protectors, defenders, and illuminators and disseminators of the African American experience in the state of Maryland. We are excited of the leadership by Delegate Henson, and we enthusiastically support this legislation. It is always the right time to be inclusive. Part of the work that we do with the commission is to ensure that the African American experience is included in the history of the state of Maryland. But as we address those omissions, it's also important that we include Black women. So again, please favorably support this bill to change the name of the Banneker Douglas Museum to the Banneker Douglas Tubman Museum. The time is right. Thank you for your time.
Our pleasure. Next, we have a virtual person. Will you be so kind and bring the virtual witness? And then we'll open it up for questions, okay? She's not on. So we were supposed to have Christiana. Is it Limniatis?
Yes, she represents Preservation Maryland, and she's speaking on behalf of the executive director who submitted his oral testimony.
Okay, if she's not here and she's not, she is now? Okay, but there's a letter of support from her in the file as well. Actually, all the letters are of support. There's no opposition. Will you please bring her up? Thank you. Right. Remember when I said that little part in my speech that there may be some technical difficulties? Just, this is it, but it's okay. We got this.
Okay.
Oh, that's good. Good for you. Absolutely, you got it. Well, she's not, she's on. Hello, good afternoon. Ma'am, can you hear us?
So are you talking to me?
Yes, yes. Could you
Oh.
please get started? Good afternoon.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize it just popped me into the room. I didn't realize. I apologize.
Thank you for
Oh.
your patience. We appreciate it. You can get started.
Excellent. So I'm Christiana Limniatis from Preservation Maryland. On behalf of our staff and the board of directors and our thousands of statewide supporters, I thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony in support of HB 390, a piece of legislation that will establish a new name for the museum operated by the Commission on African American History and Culture. Preservation Maryland is the nonprofit statewide voice for historic preservation that harnesses the power of historic places by revitalizing and reinvesting in communities, advocating and building the historic trades workforce for the benefit of all Marylanders. The museum's proposed name, the Banneker Douglas Tubman, will strengthen the museum's efforts to include and honor Harriet Tubman as the museum's namesake. Harriet Tubman's work as an abolitionist and social activist is a critical part of American history. Tubman's history is intertwined with Maryland, some of which include her birthplace in Dorchester County and the routes where she guided enslaved people to freedom. One of the more frequent routes she took was the Choptank River through Caroline County. The addition of Harriet Tubman's name to the Banneker Douglas Museum will further strengthen their work to document, interpret, and promote African American history and culture in Maryland. And again, we at Preservation Maryland are in full support of this name change. Thank you so much.
And thank you for your patience and for being with us. And now I'm going to open it up for questions. Are there any questions, Delegate Hutchinson?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
My pleasure.
Love your enthusiasm. I'm from Dorchester County. We have two Harriet Tubman was in the museum in downtown Cambridge, and then they had the visitor center, which is out closer to my home. I had the pleasure of joining Julie Slablitsky this past year, MTA, who's doing the excavation site of Ben Ross's home, which is no more than a mile from my house. My question is, are there any other Tubman museums in Anne Arundel County? And I'll tell you why I asked that question. Are there?
Not that I know of.
And the only reason I just say that is it just bothers me when I see people getting confused as to which one is which one, because we have two and we're always sending them all in the right direction. But I applaud you for your enthusiasm, your effort in doing this and honoring her. She's alive and well down in Dorchester County in many ways. Thank you.
Thank you.
Delegate Taveras, followed by Delegate Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that this
You're
is,
welcome.
this is a great bill. I just want to ask Ms. Johnson, where did you work before you came with legislative district?
The Prince George's African American Museum and Cultural Center, which was in your district in Prince George's County.
Delegate Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for bringing this bill because Maryland is so rich in African-American history. And I see that the change on the physical note, it's very almost nothing, $10,000. So my question is, can that be absorbed in the 1.6 million budget of the commission already, or is this going to come out of the general fund?
Yes, that fiscal note would likely be applied in FY 2026, and that is for marketing, printing, and promotional materials that is funded through our state budget as well as our grant funding, our operational grant funding as well. Our capital, when we do change the signage, we do have a capital budget for that will cover those expenses. Thank you.
And that's the $10,000, right? Okay, thank you. And I do not see any other questions from the committee. So I want to thank you on behalf of the entire committee for being here today and for your testimony, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And this actually concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 390. Now we have House Bill 299, Delegate Grammer. Public Safety, Militia, Active Duty Combat, Defend the Guard. And I'm going to call a couple of people, if you can come up, please. I would like Amy Lepore, Dylan Griffith, Michael Scott, and Alexander Schlegel. And the last one, Alexandra Rack. Good afternoon, Delegate,
afternoon.
how are you?
Good. How about yourself?
Good, good. Will you be so kind and get started?
Absolutely.
Thank
Thank you,
you so
Madam
much.
Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Delegate Robin Grammer here to present House Bill 299, the Defend Our Guard Act. House Bill 299 limits the use of Maryland's militia to constitutional deployments. Today, our troops are positioned in over 160 countries with military bases in at least 80. Most Americans are unlikely aware that in addition to our current deployments in Ukraine and the Middle East, U.S. troops have recently seen combat in Afghanistan, Mali, Nigeria, Kenya, Somalia, Yemen, Syria, and Iraq. The burdens of these conflicts lay squarely on the shoulders of our sons and daughters. Many veterans suffer greatly from these conflicts. Thousands suffer the loss of life and limb, carry the baggage of post-traumatic stress syndrome or other mental health issues. National Guardsmen were among those injured in the recent Jordan drone strike. Without intervention by our state legislatures, this is the news that we will hear again and again in the coming years. Our National Guard are doing the jobs that you don't see, leaving their children behind to fight wars that most Americans think are over. The Defend the Guard Act, which has been sponsored in more than 40 states, attempts to deal with this problem. It does so by limiting the deployment of the Maryland National Guard to the constitutional deployments, including declarations of war and deployments governed by Titles 10 and 32, that's invasion and insurrection. Our participation in wars that last decades and the public lamentations of broken veterans who question their purpose are indicators that policymakers should bring our deployments back to our constitutional bounds and that our Congress members need to do their jobs. The only war that our country should engage in is one that our Congress members should put their mark on. This historic principle that is military conflicts voted on will be more well thought, more clearly defined, and more succinct. We should defend those that defend us. I'd be happy to take questions, and I'd ask for a favorable report on House Bill 299, the Maryland Defend the Guard Act.
Thank you, Delegate, for being so succinct and clear. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next, please.
Yes, ma'am. So members of the committee, I am grateful to be here today, and I'm grateful that you have the opportunity to make sure our Guard is here to protect Maryland's communities. I'm a proud Marylander, and I'm past president of the Maryland Emergency Management Association. I worked in emergency management for over 12 years, guiding Cecil County through multiple presidentially declared disasters. And during this time, I had the great benefit of working side by side with the men and women of the Maryland National Guard. Across countless disasters, time and again, our Guard men and women respond into devastated communities. I have seen with my own eyes the hope and the resources they bring to bear when they serve in Maryland, supporting and protecting our communities that need it most when they are affected by the worst disasters imaginable. We know that disaster disproportionately impacts our neighbors for whom evacuation, finding shelter, and starting over are nearly impossible. Those who live in poverty, long-term care facilities, our small businesses are among them. The National Guard brings expertise and dependability when those Marylanders need it most. There are many compelling arguments in support of this House bill. Chief among them is that the bill, all it really does is compel Congress to do its job and not relinquish its war powers to the president. But because these things happen in DC, I understand they might seem a little abstract. So let's talk about what actually happens here in Maryland. The elderly couple in Baltimore City that needs to get to the hospital despite feet of snow outside their home, and the ambulance crew that needs to get to them, they need your National Guard. The family with young children on the Eastern Shore that must be evacuated because floodwaters threaten their home, they need the Maryland National Guard. They do not need the National Guard to be in Jordan, Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, because Congress has abdicated their responsibility. Instead, Marylanders deserve better when it counts, when their lives are shattered, and when life itself literally hangs in the balance. So it is on the behalf of Marylanders that we must protect our precious resources, the sons and daughters of your Maryland National Guard, and ensure they serve here in Maryland. I would ask for your support for House Bill 299. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the work you do for Maryland. Next, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me. My name is Dylan Griffith. I'm an Army combat veteran, and I served alongside a number of soldiers and Marines in the Helmand province of Afghanistan and fought in the Battle of the Sangin Valley. In my time there, I had the privilege of working alongside a large number of brave young men and women. And in my time with them, I learned that those men and women rarely recognize in the moment that what they are doing is brave. Often they are called there from a sense of duty or national pride. And in the case of the National Guard specifically, it is that they feel a sense of community, a tie to the place that they have grown up in, and they have made the choice to become better trained so that they can protect that community and their neighbors in the event that the worst should happen. But with the benefit of a clearer picture and hindsight, we can all see that they are brave for another reason, because they have made this commitment without the knowledge that they have also thrown themselves at the whim of the ebb and flow of priorities of the executive branch. And at any moment, they may find themselves deployed to a foreign country, watching on the news as the neighborhood and family members that they have sworn to protect lose their homes or lives. The Defend the Guard legislation seeks to rectify this, but by restoring deployments of the National Guard to their constitutionally intended nature. It aims to mitigate some of the lawyeristic squabbling where you will hear about the legality of deploying the Guard that seeks to avoid the issue of the constitutional requirement, which we should always keep in the back of our mind. It is clean, it is simple, and I'd ask that you support it.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
We appreciate it and for your testimony today. Next, please.
I'm gonna let him jump in front of the microphone here.
Musical chairs. Thank you all for allowing me to come and testify on behalf of the Defend the Guard Act. My name is Mike Scott, retired Air Force, over 20 years, did some time in civil service also, and I'm a resident of Bowie, Maryland. I'm also the Libertarian Party nominee for Senate, and I look forward to earning your vote. Proponents of the Defend the Guard argue that this measure safeguards individuals at home by ensuring that such a critical resource is not excessively deployed in overseas conflicts without a clear national mandate. That's part of why I'm for the Defend the Guard Act. The other part is we have around 1.3 million active duty service members right now. And if they need augmenting, we have another roughly 275,000 reservists. According to the Department of Defense, Guardsmen are our strategic reserves. They are supposed to be used in a surge capacity. We have been using this surge capacity in steady state operations since 2001 with no formal declaration of war. And this is not just a Maryland problem, this is an American problem. Citizen soldiers, when called, have little recourse but to serve. That's what we do. When we're called, we serve. The president doesn't appear beholden to calls for a ceasefire. We're bombing Yemen and it looks like we're sizing up Iran. And right now, DOD cannot pass an audit. I'm not sure the Hawks in DC need another 435,000 or so guardsmen bodies to throw at situations destabilized through their actions. The federal government should address their foreign policy to ensure we can protect the nation without making our National Guard troops part of steady state operations for the rest of time, obviously. We must protect our strategic reserves, especially when those strategic reserves are our neighbors, friends, and family. Thank you.
And thank you for your service as well.
Thank you.
I'm going to open it up for questions for this panel and then we'll call the rest of the panelists, okay? Are there any questions for this panel? First, I have Delegate Morgan, followed by Delegate Lewis, and then the Delegate Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
My pleasure.
Good afternoon. Hey,
Afternoon.
reading the fiscal note, but that's a little bit different than the preamble of the bill. What would the limitations be if the governor had to assign a guard unit to deploy domestically? Let's say the borders in Texas.
Yeah, so there are a couple things that the bill protects. That is civil issues, that's in Title 10. And Title 32 protects issues of invasion or insurrection. So there's quite a lot of leeway there that's built in to allow for the use of the guard.
You're welcome. Delegate Lewis, followed by Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Delegate Grammer, for this bill.
Thank you.
And thank you to your panelists for their thoughtful and heartfelt testimony. I, like probably a lot of us, feel terrible about misusing precious human resources like members of our military for no good reason. And I'm sympathetic to the bill. My question is, what it proposes to do seems unique, and I'm wondering if there are other states that have successfully passed similar legislation.
Who's the best person to answer that question?
I am happy to answer.
Thank
So
you.
again, it is in many legislatures. I think right now somewhere between 30 and 40 states are entertaining it. And we think this year will be the year when it passes, when it begins to pass, and that becomes kind of a domino effect in states. And so I'll answer your question by letting you know that it just passed, I believe, in the House of Representatives in New Hampshire and in the Senate in Arizona. And we expect to see that more and more as session goes on.
Yeah, I believe it's actually passed both chambers in Arizona.
Thank you. We have Delegate Lewis, you just asked, thank you. And Delegate Johnson, followed by Gazzoni, then Chisholm. Thank you. Okay, wonderful. They're so good. This is such a great committee. Delegate Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for bringing the bill. My question is twofold. Do not the National Guard serve a national and a dual roles, national and state mission, and can be mobilized to protect and defend America in battle domestically and overseas? And when was the last time Congress declared war?
Who's the best person? One person.
I want to think the last time, I can't remember.
World
I
War
think-
II.
Yeah. So
That
it's
was the last defense
decades. And you could look at the result. I mean, have you known a time in your life where you haven't looked at broken and battered veterans who question their purpose and why they went and what their life meant? I think the result is you could see it. And we've been at war ever since World War II.
Sir, did we answer the first part of your question as well? Is not their purpose to serve both at home and abroad? Yeah, and I think the answer is absolutely yes, and nothing in this bill is withholding of that. So this bill ensures that the National Guard can be called to active duty combat status without question. But one simple thing has to happen that hasn't happened since World War II. Congress must declare war.
Thank you. Delegate Hill.
Thank you, and thank you all for your service and for being here and for bringing this bill. Thank you, Delegate Grammer.
Thank you.
Starting rumors about me, man. So under current law, tell me if I'm correct that the president may call on the National Guard, but they don't deploy unless the governor consents, or is that not correct? Does it not require the governor to agree to deploy them?
That's correct.
Okay, so what would happen here under this is that you're really saying to the governor, unless there's a declaration, you can't deploy.
That's correct.
And so that enters into other kinds of politics. And so the real purpose is to constrain the governor regardless of, right, what the situation is, to say, unless there's a declaration of war,
Well,
because it's not required for
I
the
would-
president to ask for it, right?
Only one person can answer.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
I would say, I would say it's the governor is the chief executive and this would tie his hands. So not necessarily to restrain him per se, but as a matter of policy, and we are the policy setting body, that it is our National Guardsmen who would be kept here in Maryland without a constitutional declaration. So that is correct.
Delegate Taveras.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for coming. We were, there was a lot of outreach on this bill. My question, partially, one of my questions was just answered. The second one is that as someone who has responded to national catastrophic disasters like Hurricane Katrina in 2005, I was on the ground under martial law. And it was critical to have all hands on deck, so to speak, from all National Guardsmen across the country when over 80% of counties were affected. So in this case, are you not tying the governor's hands under this situation because it wouldn't be an act of war?
I actually think exactly the opposite. And there's been a great discussion around this very issue. The Defend the Guards folks, who most of whom are veterans, have written extensively on the unavailability of the National Guard due to foreign deployments. And as you've heard with her testimony, these are folks we don't think about too much, but are very necessary for local emergency situations when your local jurisdiction just doesn't have the capacity to deal with the problem. So I would say, our National Guardsmen, we need them here in Maryland, first and foremost.
Okay. Delegate Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just wanted you to reiterate again. So, we're talking about, tying the hands of the governor, with the one aspect of his authority, and that is to, if they don't declare war, then he cannot send them, internationally. But it doesn't tie his hands for someone, like if something happens in Arizona or a disaster, and that's what you're talking about, I think. What if a natural disaster or a human disaster happens here in the US?
Absolutely.
And we're finding out that we have a shortage
Yep.
because they're sent overseas for a war that wasn't declared as war. But he has the full authority now, and under this particular bill, he will still have the full authority to move them elsewhere within the United States, correct?
100% correct.
Delegate White, followed by Delegate Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here in your presentation. I think while we may not have seen any states implement this or institutionalize it, I wonder if you could expound upon and maybe could share with us, what do you see as any particular potential unintended consequences if this were to be enacted, if in the case Maryland may not respond to some of the requests by federal partners. And so could you expound upon that and maybe anticipate any unintended consequences?
So I touched the microphone. It said, don't touch the microphone.
I know you feel like you want to, right?
I almost did it again to untouch the microphone.
It
So,
always happens.
It is common that you will hear from generals or members of the Department of Defense who will threaten funding as a result of this. But it's important to keep in mind that that funding is really only necessary if you're maintaining your guard in a combat deployable status, right? A lot of that money is spent in training for them to be ready and meet deployability standards to go to foreign countries. Right? It's cost significantly less money to keep them and train them here in their home states to respond to civil unrest and natural disaster.
Okay, Delegate Hill.
And thank you for the second bite. I'm reading the details again. The way I'm reading this, where the oars are, in say the situation of January 6th of 2021, the governor would not have been allowed to respond by sending the Maryland National Guard to help out at the Capitol, because it says participation in armed conflict, and only the second one says in foreign state, and those are oars. So would that be correct? They would not have been allowed, even though that was on US ground and not in a foreign.
I would disagree with that on the grounds that it be considered a civil unrest.
All right, in the last question, Delegate Kerr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering if there is no international role for the National Guard, would there be a need for an air mission?
Well, I would say I would disagree with the idea that there's not a national role for the National Guard. I think there could be an international role for the National Guard. I think whatever that role is should be defined by a Congress that clearly states what that role is. And I think the intended consequences would be less protracted wars. I think the intended consequences would be a more safer communities. I think the intended consequences are less dead Americans. So I think there is a role, but I think we should require our leaders to do their duty under the Constitution and tell us what that role is. So we can, when we send in our folks, they can get the job done and come home.
Thank you. I see no other questions. So thank you so much
Thank you so
for
much.
being here, and thank you for your patience. And again, thank you for your service. Okay, we appreciate it. With the next panelist, will you please come up? I have Alexander Shagel. We have Alexandra Rack. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 virtual witnesses after that. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and those that sit on this committee. My name is Alex Schlegel. I'm a Dundalk resident. I'm also the Vice Chair of the Libertarian Party of Maryland. The party is strongly in favor and support the passage of HB 299, Defend the Guard bill. I am a veteran of the United States Air Force. I enlisted in 2002, served over 8 years, 4 years overseas in England, and 2 deployments to Korea, and separated from active duty honorably in 2011. As a veteran, to this day, I take the oath that I swore to the Constitution seriously. I was an instructor stationed at Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland, and at my Airman's Tech School graduation ceremony, I would give each of them a pocket constitution, reminding them of the oath that they took and to not take it lightly. Under the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 states Congress is delegated to the power to declare war. The power to wage war, once it has been declared, is delegated to the president as the commander-in-chief, Article 2, Section 2. Unfortunately, those in Congress clearly do not take their oath seriously, abdicating their duty to uphold the Constitution clearly laid out in Article 1, Section 8, and allowing the AUMF authorized use of military force to continue to this day. The 2001 AUMF passed after 9/11 and has enabled U.S. Presidents Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden to unilaterally launch military operations across the world without any congressional oversight or transparency for more than 2 decades. Myself and so many Marylanders are sick and tired of continually seeing unconstitutional, unnecessary, perpetual overseas conflicts. We are sick and tired of the lives lost, crippling injuries, PTSDs, and suicide post-deployments of our fellow veterans, friends, and family. It is time to return to a constitutional foreign policy of limited government, a republic, by bringing our troops home ending our endless wars, and only using military force when required to protect the lives, liberty, and protect Americans. I fully support HB 299. I hope you do the same. Thank you.
Thank you for your service. We really appreciate it and your testimony today. Good afternoon. How are
Good
you?
afternoon. I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me today and allowing me. I am just a citizen here to support this bill. My name is Alexandra Rock, and I'm a proponent of Defend the Guard. I think often with respect to legislation that is being considered by this body, we listen to the voices who have the most immediate interest in the outcome. But I come before you as a resident and a mother of young children whose futures are not yet decided here in the state of Maryland. I have two of them with me today, two of my four sons back here, a little civics homeschool field trip. But National Guard service is a wonderful way for young people to give service to their state and their country and gain needed life and professional experience. However, most enter the National Guard service do not do so because they have a zeal for war or a desire to engage in armed conflict, but rather to serve their localities. It'd be expected that if we were in a conflict declared to be a war by Congress, that a young person signing up for the Guard would expect to see action in a foreign nation. However, Guardsmen often sign up for service expecting to serve their state first. In a domestic capacity, we saw the tragedy this weekend of service members killed and wounded in action in Syria. I have not known the United States Congress to declare a war in Syria or in Yemen or anywhere in the world for that matter. As you well have heard in it probably seen in your written testimony with 6 people waiting to testify, they'll probably mention this, that Congress has not declared war since World War II. My children are still in elementary and middle school. So what incentive is there for me to give them an idea that they could serve their country in a non-combat capacity with the Maryland National Guard if I know they could die in the sands of Iran, Syria, or Lebanon? So let us not lose another Maryland service member in a foreign conflict that has not been designated a war and protect our National Guard. And I just want to say, I heard lots of great questions during the last panel. And why not let Maryland be the first state to pass Defend the Guard instead of waiting to see what the other states do? So I hope that you support HB 299.
Thank you. And who do you have with you today?
This is my eldest son, Matthew, and little Elliot, who's taking a nap. He got very, very tired outside in the Senate building.
Yeah. Hi, Matthew. How are you? Welcome to our committee. Thank you for your testimony today. Are there any questions for these two panelists? And you know, you said you're only a citizen. You're a very important citizen.
Thank you
and
very
your
much.
word matters, okay? And your advocacy. Thank you so much. You have a blessed evening. We have next the virtual witnesses, and we're gonna start. Will you be so kind and bring like 4 of them up? If you're able to, thank you so much. And again, thank you for your patience while we wait. And who's the little one back there? Nico? Hi, Nico. How are you? Welcome to our committee. I love the suit, Nico. Very sharp. Good afternoon. How are you? Will you be so kind and get started? And welcome to the Health and Government Operations Committee. Thank you for being so patient while we took the live testimony. You can get started. You're muted. Miss, is it Coapio? Elisa?
Yes, hi.
Hi. Tell me how to pronounce your last name, please.
That's right, Quapio, Elisa Quapio.
Oh, all right. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Can you get started with your testimony?
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Elisa Quapio, and I'm from Haverty Grace, Maryland. I'm speaking today as a teacher, a parent, and a citizen. Thank you for allowing me to speak on this important bill, HB 0299, Defend the Guard. I'm testifying for the 3rd year in a row in favor of this bill, and I believe HB 0299 is a triple win. It's a win for Maryland, for the families affected, and ultimately for America. For Maryland, we keep the skills, talent, and training of our guardsmen in Maryland to address whatever emergencies or disasters our state may face. We prevent burnout and maintain the high morale of our guardsmen for this purpose. We show the federal government that we value our state's constitutionally relegated autonomy to preserve our protective force for what we see fit. With this bill, these troops can be utilized by the federal government when Congress has made a formal declaration of war but until then, they stay in Maryland. Guardsmen can be sent abroad for all sorts of unofficial entanglements for months or years, leaving their jobs vacant. And these people tend to be service-oriented citizens, leaving behind jobs in hospitals, police and firehouses, schools, and small businesses. A teacher on my team at the high school where I teach will be leaving his classes 3 months before the end of the school year to a non-war deployment abroad. And it is devastating to his students who are immigrants from that region where he will go fight, and devastating to their education. Our state needs these great workers as much as possible, unless our nation is a threat and Congress has determined that. For families, undue absence has an obvious effect on families, especially with children or elderly parents dependent on them. And exhaustion, low morale of those multiply deployed to war zones where we don't have a war adds to the deterioration of families and society. And it's a win for America, because as Madison wrote, so I just say we need our National Guard here in Maryland.
Thank you for teaching.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Who's next, please? How about Mr. Dan McKnight?
All right, Madam Chair, thank you. My name is Dan McKnight. I'm a 13-year veteran. I served in the Pesh River Valley in Afghanistan, and I'm the chairman of a national veterans organization called Bring Our Troops Home. I'd like to start by saying that Congress has the authority to declare war, hard stop, right? The document that we swear our lives to defend has a safety measure built into it to ensure that we're not wasting our lives on inappropriate virtue signaling and calling every possible conflict defense of the Constitution. But Congress has failed in that safety measure, and so it's time for the states to interpose. The applicable code of federal law that this bill is aimed at is Title 10 USC Section 12301, and subsections B and D of that law state that a governor or a member of the National Guard or the Air National Guard may not be ordered into active duty service without the consent of the governor. That section of code was amended with the Montgomery Amendment, which added subsection F. It didn't delete B and D, but it added F. And the amendment says that the consent of the governor may not be withheld with regard to active duty outside the United States, its territories and possessions, because of any objection to the location, purpose, type, or schedule of such activity. Why was F added and B and D were not removed? Well, the reason was, and we know this because of the writings of the time from the authors and the people that debated it, was because it would have been a direct slap in the face of the governors and would have eliminated one of their constitutionally endowed powers. Congressman Sonny Montgomery, who was the namesake of the bill, he was a National Guard Adjutant General. And he wrote about this. He said, the one reason why we didn't take out B and D was because it would have been an insult by emasculating the governors. So the original intent of Section 10 is to assure the governors the availability of their National Guard units when they need them for state purposes. No voice in the Department of Defense or the National Guard Bureau has ever suggested that any training mission outside the United States would take precedence over the Guard. We support this bill and we ask that you pass through committee.
Much for being with us, Mr. McKnight. Next, please, Ms. Stacy Wolfson.
Hey, thank you. My name is Stacy Wolfson, and I'm a Baltimore native, and I'm a passionate Democrat. I'll admit that until Donald Trump was elected in 2016, I was pretty ambivalent about politics overall, and I really did not know a lot about foreign policy. But with Trump in the presidency and the prospect of another potential Trump presidency, I would really like to see Congress step up to ensure that our country stays on the right path and that I'm represented. As a Marylander, I'm proud to see that our state has the opportunity to take a step in that direction. Last year, I testified that my worst fear as the wife of a Purple Heart Marine veteran was that he would now in the National Guard be sent overseas to fight in a war that I don't support. This year is Westmore's Year of the Military Family, and we're on the brink of that fear coming true, which is extra chilling to me, knowing that 3 guardsmen were killed just a few days ago in Jordan. growing up, my understanding was that Congress declared wars, the national military fought them, and that National Guards were at home to protect the people of their states. I've learned, obviously, that that is not exactly true. If Congress is not willing to declare a war, then I don't think it's right that the National Guard should be deployed to support that war, especially if Congress does not support it on my behalf. During the pandemic, the National Guard gave me my first COVID vaccine at M&T Bank Stadium, and I would just like to see that they stay home unless Congress decides otherwise. So thank you so much for your consideration.
Excellent timing. Thank you. And thank your husband for his service, and thank you for
Thank you.
getting involved. Are there any questions for these witnesses from the committee? Seeing none, we want to thank you on behalf of the committee for your time and your service. You have a blessed day. We have next, Mr. Scott Spalding, Daniel Horton, and Michael Mahari. If you will be so kind and bring them up, please. And thank you for your patience as we wait. They're not on? No? Okay. I'm told that they're not on, and we're sure. Okay, wonderful. Not wonderful, but I just want to make sure they checked. So seeing no other questions, this actually concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 299. I want to thank the witnesses for being here, and I hope you have a great day. Take good care.
Thank you very much.
Excuse me?
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And for the committee, this actually concludes the bill hearings for today. I hope you have a wonderful evening. Know that this is unusual, that you were getting off early. So you have a great evening, okay? Thank you.